Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Reimagine with Robin. And thank you so much for making us part of your day. Reimagine with Robin is a live conversation with a leader who's working to reinvent how we interact with the world that we live in, from lost and found to gifting and more. And today, our topic that we're going to cover on the show is twofold. One is around the concept of storytelling reimagined. And then the other is centered actually around Chang himself, as he's reimagined himself as a founder multiple times, an entrepreneur who has navigated the ups and downs from building from scratch to fundraising and also to exits. And so I feel like that is top of mind for all founders out there and also investors. And so I really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you, Chang.
Thanks for having me.
And I gotta say, and Chang, this is like, I think my most favorite episode to date. I'm literally sitting at the edge of my seat. I can't even contain my excitement because we're gonna talk about one of my all-time favorite topics, which is webtoons and the cultural phenomenon of the Korean wave itself. And so I'm going to turn to the audience first, and you all know how I love to ask you guys questions. Do you know what a webtoon is? And the second question is, have you watched a Korean drama yourself? And what do these two questions have in common? And so we'll dive deeper into this while you answer. But in the last decades, South Korea has really become the global zeitgeist. I think through K-pop sensations like BTS, Blackpink, who just headlined Coachella, K-drama like Squid Game, Extraordinary Attorney Woo, Crash Landing on You, right, to esports, and a lot of critically acclaimed films like Parasite, Decision to Leave, my personal favorite, Train to Busan. And all of these have left such outsized impact on the global pop culture. And I think consumers and media and entertainment execs have been turning their attention more recently to this cultural phenomenon of webtoons. And so if you haven't consumed a webtoon yet, I would highly recommend it. But they are a combination of web and cartoon. So this is literally a digital comic that is optimized for you to read on your mobile device. And to answer that earlier question about what do these have in common? Well, webtoons have also become the most sought after source material for many hit Korean dramas like Kingdom, which I love, Itaewon Class, Business Proposal, My ID is Gangnam Beauty, which I just finished. And also what's really interesting is that 75% of its readers are Gen Z and younger millennials, and 60% are women. And why does this matter? It's because this audience have been traditionally underserved by traditional comic book publishers. And about this topic alone, who better to come on the show and talk about it than Chang himself? And so honestly, I've wanted to get Chang on our show for a long time now. We have known each other for maybe 7 years. And unfortunately, while GGV was not an investor, we did remain in touch over the years. And so a huge congrats to all your accomplishments to date. And I love to ask you to first get started by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thank you. Yes, so thanks for having me again. And my name is Chang Kim, and I also go by CK. And my background is really building, I would say, content publishing platform with social elements. So before this company, Tapas Media, I worked at Google as a product manager for blogger.com. And the way I joined Google was through an acquisition of my first company, which I co-founded. That was a blogging software company, something like WordPress in Korea. And we got acquired by Google in 2008. And prior to that, I was at Samsung, the phone company, and I was running their mobile content division. So my career has been around building technology platform for content creators and content publishing. So that's really my background. And currently I'm on a sabbatical. I'm officially jobless. I don't have any title. I left, the company. So after selling the company, Tapas Media got acquired by a Korean company called Kakao, which is one of the leading internet mobile companies in Korea. And I stayed on with the company for about 2 years, close to 2 years, and I left the company in January of this year. And it's been about three and a half months that I've been on the sabbatical, but I'm thoroughly enjoying that. And but on the side, I'm also on a personal side, I'm a angel investor in about 50 companies and funds. And of course, I'm not a fund, right? I'm just an angel investor as an individual. So I try to help other entrepreneurs here and there. So like, with small checks, and, I try to provide them with some advice and mentorship. So yeah, that's what I do on a personal side.
Thanks for all the contributions. I think, all entrepreneurs really love the advice that you can give, because you've done it, more than once. And maybe we can just spend some time to dive a little bit deeper on, like, you were at a blogging company, you had exited to Google. Why did you go back to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so even though this was my second startup, I would say, it was different enough that it almost felt like a first startup, because the first company that we co-founded was in Korea, and that was mostly for the Korean audience. But this time, after selling to Google, I first started at the Google Seoul office, but then I transferred to Mountain View, and that's when I came to California. With a family, and this time, we were starting in Silicon Valley, so in a lot of ways it felt almost like a first time company or entrepreneurship for me. And yeah, I mean, you see these people all the time. I mean, once you're an entrepreneur, then you're a forever entrepreneur. You seize things, and then, oh, like, how come like these are this way only? There can be better ways. So this was around 2012, 2013, and this was when mobile was really becoming popular in the US. But the thing is, South Korea was more advanced back then. So we had a lot of interesting mobile, based business models and apps and, things like that, in Korea. And, I got inspired by a lot of these services, and I'm like, hey, how come, things are already happening in Korea, but then not elsewhere. So that's like one topic that I was thinking about a lot. And I was in the US, and this was around 2012, 2013 timeframe. If you remember that time, iPhone, probably something around iPhone 6 or 7, I would say. I don't know, but like somewhere around that. And Instagram was becoming popular. And, Pinterest, all these like mobile-based services were coming out and becoming on the cusp of like becoming really big. So because my background is storytelling and building platform for storytellers, I was thinking about, okay, so mobile is becoming a thing in the US. Most everybody will be consuming all the digital content on their mobile devices. So then, hey, how do you reimagine, no pun intended, storytelling for mobile audience? And the answer was already out there. Again, in Korea, in Asia, a lot of this mobile-based storytelling was already happening. So part of the inspiration was, hey, it's not like we're like developing this out of thin air. I mean, there are some consumers and content creators already publishing for mobile. That ecosystem is already thriving. And how can we bring that to the US? How come there's nothing like that in the US? So that was the beginning of the company. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it is so amazing, because you had moved to the US and you also founded a company, like two also very difficult things to do at the same time simultaneously, but you were also able to see the opportunity because of that, and started Tapas. And we were just talking about this before we came live. I actually met you while it was called Tapastic, right? Before Tapas Media name change. And so can you tell us about the evolution of Tapas too, and just how you saw the rise of webtoons itself and how it pertains to your company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in terms of the evolution of the company, so we started out as almost like a purely UGC publishing platform, because that's, my background. That was the kind of product that I wanted to build. So it's
Yeah.
like, something similar to a blogger or blogging platform, but for storytellers and, IP creators. Was the first, I would say, like V1 of Tapas. So it was just almost like purely publishing platform, but we added a lot of publisher facing features like social networking, monetization. So we wanted to build this platform that is best publishing platform for content creators and storytellers. So that was the mission. So I would say that was the first phase. But then as an outcome of having those, that platform, is obviously the content, right? You get all these content creators come on board, and I think year 3, 4, we reached something like 60,000 content creators on the platform publishing on our platform. And obviously, if you look at the cream of the crop, like top 5%, 10%, these are really, really good. So what you do is you sign them up, and we started developing original content with these creators, top creators. So we were getting into the content development space, original IP creation space. That was almost like, the second phase. And then after that, we took the Kakao investment, and then eventually got acquired by Kakao. So that would be like the third phase. But the evolution is really interesting, because like when we were going through that, we didn't really think, too much about, like, there's no rule book or playbook or textbook about, the progression. But only later on, what was really interesting to me was most companies in the space, if you think about Netflix, and of course it's a completely different scale, much larger scale, but still nonetheless going through a similar phase. They started out as a technology platform. They developed these awesome streaming technologies.
Yeah.
And then they were mostly a technology company licensing content from third parties. But then eventually they got into the content development space. And I would argue that today, hey, is Netflix more like a TV movie company or a technology company? I would say it's more like a TV company, right? So investing heavily in the original content. So companies in the space usually kind of go through that path, which was really fascinating to me in hindsight, because, it's not like we were comparing ourselves against Netflix every day, but then it sort of became that way. So anybody out there who's thinking about, hey, we're developing content-based platform, you'll have to think about, hey, is our company more like the platform business or content business? Because these are really, really different. So that's number one. Number two, even if you start from one thing, you'll find yourself becoming like another thing. Usually starting out as a technology platform, but becoming more like a content platform. So yeah, that was our evolution path.
Got it. I guess you also mentioned a little bit about, the investment piece. And, we've actually interacted a few times while you were fundraising. And can you tell us about that process? Like how your seed was compared to your Series A or your B? And then I'll actually ask a little bit more about strategic investment as well. But I'm guessing it was not a slam dunk at every round.
No. So we had so much difficulty explaining the concept to investors. Like, I would say you are one of those people who actually, got the idea, but then most of people, venture capitalists, they never understood the concept and the true potential, because they haven't seen something like this. So when we were explaining, hey, this is a publishing platform for creators, and IP, anybody who wants to create new IP, they can come to our platform and publish their stories. But a lot of people conceived us as like another comic book publisher. Like if you think about Marvel, DC, these are completely different businesses.
So different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like print based, and then their user base is 30-year-old, 40-year-old males, and then they go to Comic Cons. It's like a complete different audience. And of course, there are some of the overlapping areas, such as, hey, comic books and novels are really cost-effective way and fast way to develop original IP. And then once you develop lots of IPs and some IPs become more popular, and then you can take those IP. Earlier, you were talking about that playbook, right? That path, that business model is an overlapping area. If you think about Disney or any of the big media companies, there are like developing IP in this way all the time. Like Marvel, they created the biggest franchise, Avengers and all these amazing franchises, right? If you think about their roots, it's typically in the form of comic books and novels.
Yeah.
So that like IP creation methodology, I mean, that part is the shared part, but then in terms of the audience, in terms of the approach, it was completely different. But most investors didn't get that part. So we had some difficulty explaining the concept. And of course, as we built the audience, as we built the traffic and revenue, the metrics spoke for themselves, and eventually we were able to raise subsequent rounds. But then when we were starting, we had a lot of difficulty explaining the concept and the potential.
Yeah. What advice would you give entrepreneurs today who, are creating companies, who are the first in their categories, or having difficulty to like tell that story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people understand the story a lot better when it's put in the context of existing stuff, right? So Uber for X. I mean, of course, like, once you have like too many of them, right? I mean, people make fun of that, but I think at least the framework itself is useful, right? Because people understand a new concept much better when it is put in the context of existing things, existing concepts. The other thing is, of course, especially in this funding environment, you have to show the metrics at some point. The advice that I give to my companies and founders is, hey, you have only one chance to raise money based on your track record and concept. That might be like pre-seed, or it might be like whatever, first round. But then from even like the second round, I would say, you have to show the progress, the metrics or whatever milestones achieved. You have to be able to show them even from the second round. It can be like a still convertible round or seed round, angel round, doesn't matter. Like, usually it's only the first round that you can sort of like, sell the dream and then raise money based on the concept. But, from there, you have to, show with the results.
Yeah. And you also, talked a little bit about having Kakao come in as an investor. So like they are a strategic investor into the company. A lot of people also, don't know, are unsure of like whether to take strategic money and at what point, because is your exit limited to them, or do you share information to them? Like, how was your thought process like when you decided to take on that investment? And obviously it came with a lot of amazing benefits too, right?
Yeah, in general, this is funny because we eventually sold the company to Kakao. But in general, I would be against raising money from strategic investors because there's many reasons. Because the interest may not be aligned, because companies always change. By the time they made the first investment and the second investment, things might be radically changing. People might move on. So it's like there might be a completely new set of people coming in who doesn't really share the context of the previous engagement and interactions. They have to learn from new, and again, the company's priorities might be changing. So in general, I would be advising against, and of course I shouldn't generalize because there's so many different cases, but in general, I would say, hey, it's not really a good idea to raise money from strategic if you have other alternatives. Now, that might be a different story if your company can be jump-started by those relationships. For example, I worked at Samsung, and there have been some of the companies that we invested, and then we used Samsung's distribution and scale to really turbocharge their business. So their business became 10x from the next day. Then in that case, I mean, why not? You should definitely go with Samsung, right? As an example. So I would say it's not, always the case where like, strategic investor is not a good investment, but I would say more than not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of these reasons, I would be advising against raising money from strategic.
And how did you decide to? I mean, I guess like Cacao themselves was not a direct competitor to Tapas, right? Like totally different region and like target audience and even creators. Because of that, like, why did you decide to sell to Cacao versus doing it on your own or IPO, other paths?
Mhm. Yeah, so we first set out to raise funding. This was back in 2021,
Mm.
and we were raising our Series C funding. And then by that point, Kakao was already an existing investor. So anytime you raise money, you have to go back to the existing investors and then get the consent and everything, right? So go through that process. And we were talking to Kakao about raising money, and then Kakao wanted to also, they were like, "Hey, can we invest instead of this other investor?" But then we didn't really like that idea because at that point, like Kakao's ownership shares would be kind of like, getting to that point where it was kind of becoming too high. So we were like, hey, we wanted to raise money from other company and then we wanted to stay independent. So there was some back and forth. That became acquisition discussions, and then, so that's how it happened. And of course, we maintained a really close relationship with Kakao. They were providing us with some of the Korean IP, which did really, really well on the platform. So the relationship was really, really, synergetic. We liked the teams, each other's teams. So the relationship part was, definitely there. So we got really lucky. Again, we took the money from strategic, and then there was a relationship, and then there was a value add, and eventually got acquired by the same company. But these things don't happen to all the companies. So that's why I'm saying, like, again, we got lucky.
Mm-hmm. Um, and one last question around like the acquisition piece. So you stayed on with the company for a little bit longer. How did, and just out of curiosity, how did the content evolve, and how did the creators evolve on the platform, and did the end users know about the acquisition? And like as a founder who was like, oh, this was what I created for so many years, like did you get very sentimental for it to change, or was it welcomed?
No, I mean, obviously every founder, I think, they're going to go through the same process when they have different options, right? What do you choose? This can be potentially like, altering your life for the next like 5 years, right? So it's not a light decision to make. I remember taking a lot of walk with my wife, and we were like talking about this a lot. But eventually the decision was, hey, we knew that this business was becoming more and more IP heavy business. Just like I mentioned earlier,
Mm.
right? I mean, it's not just like a technology and platform
Right.
only anymore, but it's IP. That's really the game changer. Then, how do you develop the IP? That's like a massive investment. Developing original IP, regardless of the vertical, that's a huge investment, and potentially long time development. So we were considering all these factors, and then we were like, hey, it might be a better idea to partner with somebody who has more resources that they can invest in the IP development rather than, I mean, we could have raised money and then invested in IP, but then like that compared to partnering with Kakao, who already had like a bunch of IP, original IP that was never introduced outside of Korea for the most part, was really good idea. So that was the decision factor for us.
Yeah, well, I'm very glad that this decision happened because I can now consume so much more content. And one of the things we were talking about, like right before the show went live, was that I'm always waiting at the edge of my seat because I don't know how to read Korean. And maybe it's actually faster for me to like one day learn Korean. So I could just read all this Korean content without waiting for it to be translated by other fans. And so we talked about this question that's top of mind for a lot of people right now. It's like, how will AI actually change this industry? And like Chang would love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't think, at least for the time being or for the near future, AI will be creating content from beginning to end, without any human input, and then like people go crazy. I mean, that'd be like, you go to Netflix and then all the shows were developed by AI from the beginning to end, and then people go crazy. I mean, that's both unlikely and also like, there's a fair question: is that the world that we want to live in, right? I mean,
Mm,
you want to engage with the creators behind the show, behind the IP. So it's not just about the content, the end result as an end result, but it's also the people behind it.
that's
So
true.
yeah, I mean, the kind of future that I envision slash hope is, hey, AI, kind of being a really powerful tool, bring up the productivity significantly so that there is a better quality content that is still produced by humans, and there's like a fans involved, and then again, not just the content consumption is happening, but interaction and community between the creators and the fans are happening as well. So if you look at today, how content is being created, it's not efficient. I mean, especially for this one person, two people medium like webtoons, or even like web novels.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on the creators to the point of sometimes burnouts, right? It's like that's why people go on, hey, I want to take some time off, and then as a fan, you're like, oh, you're like hanging me loose here, right? Like, give me
Yeah.
the story. Because sometimes it's really labor heavy, especially for like digital drawing. Like, somebody still has to draw. But imagine, hey, AI doing like 80-90% of the drawing, and then you still, as a human creator, you get involved, and then, hey, you're like directing. It's like, there's a
Right.
scene like this, and there's like, it should be like that. I mean, that'd be a lot more productive, and that reduces the workload of the creators while, hopefully producing like a same or similar level of quality. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm envisioning, and also at the same time hoping.
Oh, that would be phenomenal. Like my husband hates this, but I stay up until midnight every single day of the week because the next episode of each webtoon that I'm reading comes out. And like, so I lose sleep over it. But there's like, you have to wait a long time for the creator to like come because it is art, right? And even for Tapas, when you were building it, you had Canva, right? Where the creators would kind of build there and collaborate there and then be able to publish on your platform. And so if there is AI to be able to empower them, I am 100 or 1000% for it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I still value the human interaction. I mean, like if you look at, I mean, these are completely different examples, but like,
Mhm.
NBA, for example,
Mm,
NBA, obviously there's the game, the ball game happening, and people go to the arena and then like, participating in the games, but then there's so much more happening outside of those games.
yeah.
Like I would say,
Oh,
like,
that's true.
Twitter
Mhm.
culture and sneakers culture, like fashion, like whatever it might be. So like I would say the games are only like smaller, becoming smaller and smaller part of the whole ecosystem and culture, right? So I think that might be happening to other places as well, where, hey, again, you're consuming the content, but you go much beyond just consuming the content, and you kind of miss the human interaction. One thing about the AI development, in my opinion, is the
Mm,
more AI gets developed, the more people might be craving for, hey, like human interactions and like the genuine sort of human to human community and interaction. My theory is that more people will be, because I mean, you have to think about, hey, with AI doing most everything, like what are we supposed to do as humans?
yeah.
And I think a lot of it goes back to like the human to human interaction and community.
It's kind of like post-COVID. Everybody is like, I need more people interaction, right? And just
Right.
go on virtual strike. Like this morning, I was like, can we just not meet on Zoom? Even just talk over the phone would be very
Yeah.
nice. Just, focus on your voice.
Yeah, you
So
can't replace a person-to-person interaction, in-person meetings. Especially, that was really interesting, as you know, is Gen Z seems to be kind of embracing this more. And what that reminds me of is, remember like when the PCs came out, internet came out, people said, hey, like nobody's going to use paper anymore. But then,
Yeah.
printer and paper industry is, it's growing. So likewise, I don't think like Zoom and all these virtual interactions will kill like offline at all, but then in some cases it might be actually thriving more.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess the last question, which we'll, end with is, would you do it again? Like, would you reimagine yourself again as a founder or entrepreneur?
I think so. I mean, I haven't decided anything yet because that's what I'm trying to figure out this year by taking time off. But yeah, I mean, again, once you're a founder forever. And I think entrepreneur. So like, but regardless of what I do, what I also want to do is to help other founders and entrepreneurs. The world has so many problems, right? I mean, it's literally on fire in some cases, and there's so many problems to be fixed. And I think that, in addition to governments and big companies, I think startups need to play a really essential key roles in solving the world's problems. But if you think about today, there's, it's not really, there's some mismatch or distance between the real problems and startups. Like a lot of startups are being founded by young people in their 20s, and then they see their own kind of problems, like, hey, better dating sites. I mean, nothing wrong about the dating sites, but if you're only working on those problems that you can see, it's not really solving all the problems of the world. So part of what I want to do, contribute for, is kind of helping more people come to the world of startups and helping solving the world's problems. And then if you just like bring more people to the startup world and entrepreneurship, then you're potentially creating kind of like more bad companies, right? So the other kind of part of the equation is, how do we help them become more successful and make less mistakes? So that's where people like me, people who have done this before, come in, where they can share, hey, these are all the mistakes that we made, so hopefully you don't make the same mistakes. So yeah, that's part of what I want to do for next.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show, being a part of the ecosystem, and like always consistently giving back. Yeah, I think, we all really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And thank you. And I will, for the audience, highly recommend a couple of webtoons. So if you DM me, I can share those. But I would say must reads are like Semantic Error and Traces of the Sun is my current favorite. And so if you like that and want more, let me know. And Chang, if you have any great recommendations, please let us know by all means.
Oh, you mean right now?
Oh, no.
Later. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.